Well, hey, church, just want to, welcome to this. This is a conversation, and it's a conversation about mental health, and it's about mental health now. And so, it's going to be a continuance of conversation. We're not just going to have a conversation now and say, okay, there it is. Here it all is neatly packed, all contained in a box and all of that. But it's something that has been on my heart, and especially, when the whole COVID-19 and people have been talking about coming out of COVID-19, the next pandemic, a pandemic of mental health and mental illness. And I'll be perfectly honest, I find that an odd concept for them to be describing something in that context. But people's mental health and mental illness, because it's poor mental health that leads to mental illness. Am I? Yeah.
Yep.
And so it's a conversation. We've got Rocky. Rocky's one of our pastors, one of our team. Church. Anna is, you're one of our team. And you're professionally, just so that
I'm a psychologist.
You're a psychologist. What aspect of it really that's really captivated you?
I'm actually really fascinated by cognitive neuropsychology. I'm doing some research on that particular field within psychology.
Okay, all right. So, so the conversation. So here we are now, and I guess if we get to, if I was to say, let me say what I'm hearing people talk about a lot that's coming up is just this whole, it's not a thought, but it seems to be what people are giving attention to is trauma. Mm. And the trauma that people carry in their lives. The timing of this is post George Floyd. Mm-hmm. Even now, there's been another killing of a black man in the US, and we've had all sorts of protest and people talking and hurt people, yep. And there's just so many things. But there is a word that people are using a lot, and it's trauma. Mm-hmm. And so I think, tonight, let's start the conversation on that. I know it's something that you, in talking to people, it's real. Mm-hmm. And I guess we'll, start the thing. If I was to throw a couple of things that really captivated my interest in this yep. whole subject, some time back, and we talked a lot about it. I've been reading the work of a particular psychologist, and just got captivated with what he discovered to do with trauma and how it impacts a person, impacts their lives. And he captivated me because he made this statement where he says he believes that it's impossible for someone to form an addiction, chemical addiction to something, if you do not have trauma in your life. Which that in itself for me was like, whoa, that just like, this is just, and so just this whole thought of trauma, how it affects people. Yep. And from my limited study, but it's not study over the last 2 weeks. It's study over the last maybe 3-4 years. And how this trauma takes an event of the past, and it stays present.
Yes. Now
it's like contaminates everything in your present. Everything you filter everything through this traumatic event. The way you see people, the way you respond to people, the way you react or respond to given circumstances in life, your filter is always through this. And obviously then what it means is you never leave your past. You always bring in your past with you. And then at the same time, it shapes everything about the future.
Yeah.
Because that's how you see the future, through that. And just this this sense of that it's this ever-present thing.
Yeah.
It's not a, and that's what I was fascinated with his work, where he speaks of the fact that it's not the trauma or the event of trauma is not necessarily held in specific detail, but it is almost like it's almost foggy, but it's clear enough for it to be real.
Yeah.
Yet it's difficult to express it because it was so far ago. But however, it is in me now, and a lot of people who experience traumatic things that have happened to them, there's not a day goes past, sometimes not an hour goes past, without thought being given to this that is now shaping all my interactions with now. So I know I think I said a lot, and I tried to make it really as basic as possible, yet at the same time go, this is it. So here we go. So
here we go.
Trauma.
Trauma. So what is trauma? I think one of the reasons why this conversation is important is because it can help people understand and give language to how they're feeling right now, and really understand the layers, because there are layers of pain, isn't it?
Yeah. Because I think it also, for people watching or listening, it's not just for a person who maybe trauma is an issue in their life, this conversation, as we initiate it. It's for people who know people who have said, so there's a certain amount of understanding and response, and there's a certain amount of, so I'm not crazy, that we want to try and...
Absolutely.
That's the start. That's what the conversation's about.
Yeah.
So
and because it is important to give people language to express that, both the ones that are being affected by the traumatic experiences and events that we've been seeing in the news, and trigger, and what that does in terms of the personal traumas that it triggers for people. It's important to understand what trauma is. And trauma is exactly that. It's not just the events or the stories or the memories of a painful experience in the past. Trauma is actually the emotions and physical sensations that are imprinted in your body and your mind as a consequence of those events. And what that does to you, those emotional imprints, then create disruptive physical sensations in the present. And that's why it's important for people to understand what that does to you when you have experienced trauma in the past. And it stays with you in the present, and it shapes how you see yourself, others, the world, and then it's carried on through the future unless you deal with it.
I'm sure he's probably asking the same question as I'm asking right now. Imprint.
Yeah. Huh? What do you mean by this? Yeah.
So what that means is
just
that...
unpack what...
Yeah.
Because it's important for people... I just think for people to go, imprint. Now...
Yeah. So when you experience a traumatic event, what that does to you is it shapes the way... those emotional reactions, the thoughts that stay with you from that experience, that shapes... your own emotional and psychological makeup. So that's why we use the word imprints, because it stays imprinted in you. So unless you deal with it, what's important about this is that usually we would say that you can't really, and what I'm about to say, please don't take it out of context if you just switched on your TV thing now, just watch what I said before. But you can't treat trauma. You can deal with the imprints in your mind, in your body that stay from the traumatic experiences. But what I mean by you can't treat trauma is you can't undo what's been done to you.
But you can let it go.
But you can let it go.
See, okay, so a long time ago, right? So a long time back, I had a really, well, as I look back, I think God got me out of trouble accident. And so it was a really bad water skiing accident, where when I went to a doctor, they asked me what it was that I went headfirst into, because I said I went headfirst into the bank of a river. And they said, wow, so what did you hit? I said, the bank of a river. And he said, no, what was the bank of the river made of? And I said, sand. And he said, well, that's the only reason why you're still alive, because of that's how close to, death or quadriplegic I was. In fact, when Kathy saw it, she says, oh God, I'm married to a quadriplegic now. And, so later on, I went to I had massive neck problems. And I went to a masseur, and she starts doing what masseurs do on your neck. She said, did you have an accident? And I said, yeah. I didn't explain it. She said, oh, your body hasn't let go of the accident yet.
Yeah.
She said, so she goes, and there'll be a point where one day your body just lets go of it, and no longer is it holding on to it, because your muscles contracted enough to protect you from danger. Now, with trauma, from my understanding, it's a little bit like your emotions go, to protect yourself.
Yeah.
And there's a point somewhere where now you're holding this, and it's been able to go. You've got to let it go.
Yeah.
Am I on or off?
No, you're on. There's a release that needs to happen, but that release is a process. Yeah. And people need to understand what that process is about. And that process is about a couple of things that I think will be really useful for us to discuss today. One of them is, what trauma does to you. The main problem with trauma is that it takes away your sense of control over yourself. And everything in your body has been designed to operate, to function under that basic assumption that you can take charge of yourself, of what happens with you. Right. Your immune system is about forecasting for possible threats to your immune system, and that's how your immune system is built. It forecasts the possible threats in your environment, and you develop an immune system based on predictions. I'm putting it very simply, but that's really how it works.
That's why it's called autoimmune system.
Yeah. So everything in your body has been designed for that. Your emotional reactions to traumatic experiences trigger your threat systems in your brain and in your body that make you go, alert, alert, alert. So essentially all of that is based on that assumption that you're supposed to feel in charge of yourself and control over what happens to you. Trauma takes that away from you. And that's why trauma recovery, the first thing that it's actually about giving you ownership over yourself, your own body, your own mind again. And that's why it's important to engage with these things, because recovering from trauma is actually about noticing how it feels and being okay with what you know, being okay with how it feels, not being impaired by how it feels right now. So there's a release process, but before the release, there are other things as well, which involve emotional regulation, understanding about your emotions, understanding how to self-regulate, understanding the value of the other things that will help you process, that will help you basically be okay with what you know and be okay with feeling how it feels. Once your body feels that it feels the pain and it's okay, it can continue to function. Once you do that, then you can release. Yeah. But until you go through that process, you're not ready to release yet. And I think in the current context of all the layers and layers of pain that people are experiencing right now, and everyone really, because we have our Black brothers and sisters who are reliving traumatic experiences from their own lived experiences when they saw, when they see what's happening in America, and especially when you watch the video of George Floyd being murdered. I mean, that triggers pain to a level that we need to understand.
Yeah.
Right?
And like you said,
it's a process. So it's people being awakened to something that's been embodied. And then lots of conversations are, hey, you should let this go. But it's embodied. It's like, it's imprinted, like you said, it's imprinted. And as Gary alluded to, a traumatic event happens, and then that's the framework in which you experience reality through as well. So there's double fold. So once it's, we have to change our neurological framework of how now we process reality. For example, if a racist incident happens to somebody when they're 13, they have a really bad interaction with the police, or any sort of really hypersensitive event happens, they now embody that trauma, look to life through that framework, and their daily experiences, there's loads of question marks. Because like you said, your body's trying to defend against potential more trauma.
It's a filter.
Yeah, so it's now, I see life through the potential of me being attacked because of my race. So what I've said is this George Floyd incident has all the question marks people have been carrying over these years turned into exclamation marks.
Yes.
It's like, bing, 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 bing,
But
bing, bing.
the thing that, you know, underestimated, if I was to, is the depth of what people carry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the breadth
Yeah.
of people who carry it.
Yeah.
And the personal identification of, well, that's him, but that's actually my life too.
Yeah.
Might not play out like I might not have got murdered,
Yeah.
but someone in my family line, somehow, somewhere, I now identify that is me.
Yeah.
And that's wrong, and it's got to stop.
Yeah.
And
Because you identify with things that reflect you,
Yep.
right? That's the easiest thing to identify with representation. That's why representation is so important when it comes to media or literature or any of those things. So I know for me, you know, I looked at that and knew that the craziness is that if I'm born in a different geographical location, in a different space, and I do exactly what I was doing today, there is a potential that that could have ended my life. And that resonates more so than any. And I think not just for like, even just the black community, like majority of the minority community can also see themselves in that being like, I'm Indian, but I can sense that all of this trauma or micro trauma like that I've been carrying, that alerts me as well.
Yeah.
Which then you have like you said, a whole...
What, it might sound weird, and I don't want to make a conversation about me, but... right? But what's brought up in me, I go, I can't tell you how many times it was like, oh, Australian. You're from the Antipodes, are you? And I used to get Mark Wilkinson to make all my phone calls for me because I had the wrong accent. So nowhere near, nowhere near. But I started to think about my own experiences of, and then you sit there and think, now put yourself in those shoes with historically and the systemic nature of it all.
Yeah.
It's just...
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's and what you also have is you have another situation where people have been suppressing a lot of these emotions. And you know, we've all had lots of conversations over the last few weeks, which is a good thing because we need to have lots of conversations about this, and we also need a new vocabulary to have these conversations. We need to, like I said earlier, we need to give language, appropriate language to express all of these things. And the most common thing that I keep hearing from all of my friends, my black brothers and sisters, when they tell me about their experiences of even police brutality and racism and lots of other painful events that have happened in this country, what everyone says is they all say the same thing, like it's you just suppress. You know, when you know, I went through this in my childhood, just you suppress it, you move on. You suppress it, you move on, right?
Yeah.
There's that thing. And actually, every time I hear that, I think, wow, like this is a symptom of trauma because traumatized people are afraid of feeling because that's what trauma does to you.
Yeah.
It's, you know, with time, those imprints stay with you, and then the culprit becomes not just the actual event, but the culprit becomes your own emotions, your own physical sensations. You're like, your brain goes, no, I don't want to feel that because I need to move on, I need to function, I can't, I need to, so you keep suppressing. And again, that's not healthy either.
There isn't the luxury, especially with people that are in communities that are in survival mode. There isn't the luxury to remain in a state of, that really hurt me. Let's dwell on it. Like, because if you dwell, you die.
Yeah.
Do you mean so you have to adapt? Yeah. As human beings, you know, throughout history, we've adapted. So then you naturally adapt to the level of trauma that affects your day-to-day. Because if a traumatic event knocks you for 6 and you can't work for 2 weeks, then how are you going to pay your rent? So then you go, okay, that person called me a derogatory term, but I still need to get groceries, I still need to turn up to work, and things like that. So then you've raised your bar for the traumatic event to knock you out of your game, do you know what I mean? But then all it takes is just like matchsticks. All it takes is something like a George Floyd, and lockdown, which is unavoidable. You can't distract yourself with work. You can't distract yourself with going out. Every 5 minutes, you're looking at a screen of something horrific happening. And that's, I feel like, it leans into privilege. There isn't the privilege to experience and journey through the trauma. So therefore, people that are on the other side of privilege just have to kind of go on with their normal life.
Okay, so, all right, so I think we've introduced the subject. And, because, you know, at the moment, you know, the where everybody's hearing the word trauma is, and quite rightly so, this is the bullseye in society right now, to do with trauma associated with racism and the abuse of a people group, right back to the whole, everything to do with 400 years ago with the beginning of slavery, and there's all of that, right? I'm also mindful at the same time that there are people who have gone, oh, whoa, now this is stirring something in me as well, right? And so somehow as we, in this, I think, you know, some of the things that you would go as in your role, if you're talking to someone, let's get into the okay, so all right, I'm traumatized. I am, now what do I do?
Yeah.
All right, how do I, what's the path in front of me look like? And coming back to before what I said, and we go, well, I'm your friend, and I want to walk this out with you. What's some of the? So let's get into some of those types of things.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, okay, so to the first question, if you're an individual who needs to address these layers of trauma, we need to talk about emotions.
Can I just back up? Right?
Yeah.
Because I'm always, all right, layers.
Oh, yes, layers. Layers of trauma, yes, that's an interesting sentence, isn't it? So that, again, that refers to when you're traumatized and re-traumatized and re-traumatized.
One event on top of another.
Exactly.
Same reoccurring theme, just keeps going over and
so
over.
It's not just one event on top of one event, it's maybe even just 1 or 2 events and then lots of triggers, lots of situations that trigger those emotional imprints that I talked about earlier. So that's what I mean by layers and layers and layers, because it could be, you know, It's not just the one event after another, it's more than that.
That's interesting what you said in terms of, because I think some people think it's like there's one traumatic event and then the thing that could imprint again has to be as traumatic. But like you said, it's like a trigger. So there could be one event in my past that was massive, like similar to your skiing. Like there's something that's happened that's really big. And then it's like, it doesn't take anything to go on top of that. It could be you've walked outside and something really micro has happened, but then it links to the...
Absolutely. It could be sounds, physical sensations,
and it's important
images.
when we go, like, because we're using terminology, micro.
Sorry.
Right. No, it's okay. But they're the terms everybody's using. And microaggression, in other words, what they're saying, tiny little things.
Exactly. Let's break it down. Exactly.
On an everyday basis. Some of those tiny little things, some of those tiny little things will trigger. Is that what we're talking about?
That's exactly it.
And you can't decide. And I think that's the thing. Some people are like, oh, but then just ignore all the micro triggers.
Because that's the thing, where helping people understand. Well, can't you just get over this?
Exactly.
No.
No.
But can you? Yeah. But not just by get over it with.
Yeah, exactly. It's not that simple, isn't it? And especially when you're in the context that we're in. Hey, let's talk about that as well. Because when you're in lockdown,
locked up. It felt like locked up for people more
exactly. And when you're really experiencing what I would call hyper arousal, which is the other thing that we need to talk about, which is, you know, your... can I get a little bit technical?
And I'll try and go technical.
I won't keep up, but Gary will keep up, so it's fine.
So hyper arousal is when your inbuilt arousal system is obviously being overactivated by your environment, by what you're doing, by social media. I'm pointing to my phone. Yes, it's there. By social media, by all the conversations, the important conversations that we're having right now. But all of these things are triggering and re-triggering your sympathetic nervous system, which is your kind of fight or flight autopilot inbuilt defense mechanism in your brain. And what that is doing every time something triggers your fight or flight, your sympathetic nervous system, that kind of self-defense mechanism triggers about 1,400 biological responses, from cortisol, the stress hormone, flooding your entire autonomic nervous system, your blood pressure increases, your heart rate increases. So there's a range of chemical reactions that are triggered by those things. That's what I meant by layers of trauma, plus people getting stuck in this negative emotional state that will impact not just your mind, but also your body and ultimately your health.
So that's where it plays out when we're talking about, let's start with trauma, we're talking about all of this, and I think for some people, so what's the link? Why are we talking about health issues of a particular group of people and the disconnect? And I think more and more people are starting to understand it and see it. That what goes on in our physical body is so linked to what goes in our internal workings, and it plays out.
Absolutely, absolutely. And all of these experiences and everything that people are experiencing right now, especially with, and all of these negative emotions that are important, by the way. And again, please don't take this out of context, because it is important to experience the negative emotions that we are experiencing right now. Don't get me wrong. I mean, if you watch a video of a police officer murdering brutally another human being, you should feel anger. Don't get me wrong. You should feel anger when you need to fight for justice or against injustice. You need negative emotions. But what people also need to understand, and please understand this, I'm saying this from a psychological perspective, that negative emotions serve one purpose in our body. They exist for one reason and one reason only. They exist to channel your attention, to get you focused on doing one thing, right here, right now, which is to save your skin, to save your life. So negative emotions are, they have that function. They are about self-defense. And the other thing about negative emotions that we all need to understand is that our brain, there's an asymmetry between how we experience positive and negative emotions. So it's called negativity bias. It's an actual thing. Your brain is hardwired to pick apart mistakes or to experience negative emotions with a lot more intensity than the positive ones.
So you said something once to me that that I've used often in talking to people. You said you need to think of your brain like it's a computer.
Yeah.
So if we start thinking about it's not a, you're the living, thinking being, not your brain. Your brain there is to run things. So your brain says, danger, run. Danger, defend.
Yep.
Attack, because if you don't, you might lose out.
Yep.
It switches on these.
That's exactly it.
Yep.
That's exactly it. So, and it's not a design fault, by the way.
No, it's designed to look like
preservation.
Yeah. It's preservation.
Exactly. It serves its purpose. Now, what we need to understand, though, is that we were not built to stay in that emotional state. And that's because if you, again, you know, all the biological reactions, there's a chain reaction of things that are happening in your body to get you ready to run away or to fight or to, you know, to defend you from the threat. But that state is not sustainable. But what your brain will do, though, is it will adapt, because your brain is built to match patterns, to match those reactions to the patterns of threats that it's interpreting in your environment. And what that means is that it will, over time, if the longer you stay in that negative emotional state, the more damage it can make to your physical health and your mental health as well. Okay. Because it will literally regulate. Your blood pressure will stay at a high, your cortisol levels will stay at a high, your brain will be poisoned with adrenaline all the time. So you can't stay in that.
And what trauma does is locks you in that state.
It locks you in that state.
Okay, so, all right. So just some of the...
That's what happens.
We're getting there. We're getting there.
Yeah, we're getting there. We're getting there. We haven't. Right. I haven't started talking about what you do to recover.
That's what I'm going to ask. Yeah. No, I know. So, but this is good because
we're breaking it down, isn't it?
So, okay, so, right, it's locked here.
Yeah.
Right?
So we're stuck in that loop.
Which is a little bit like what I said when the masseur said to me, "Oh, your body hasn't let go yet. It's locked.
Yeah.
It's locked in protection mode so that you don't break your neck."
Yeah.
Now, so trauma, your emotions, so your somehow, however it works, locks you in this.
Yep.
In this, and that's where at the start when I talked about where it's like it just contaminates your present. It's constantly work. So some of the things now about. All right, let's talk about. All right, I get this. Hopefully we've unpacked it in a simplistic enough way for people to grasp this. All right, so
how do we get unstuck?
So I'm me now. So all right, I'm locked in this, and I want to start. How do I unlock?
Yeah.
How do I unlock?
Yeah. So
because I think what's difficult for people, and I ask this question, right, is it's about me now. Not about the world I live in. And the more, because if we're not careful, it's the only way I can fix me is to fix this world.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Now, and this world needs fixing. Come on, and if anybody disagrees with that, I mean, I don't know what planet you're living on, but it's because I do think it's important for people to go, because if we're going to change this world, let's change it from a healthy position first. And I believe we're talking to church people about this. There's a God healing, and there's a community construct that church can offer if we get it right.
Yeah.
That gets the healing going, gets the mending going.
Absolutely.
And then there's the big mending and the big healing that the church could church people and the work of God in a person's life.
Absolutely.
So.
Yeah.
That's
Right,
so
so-
exciting, by the way, because you just said something there that I think is really deep. The whole,
He's
like...
always dropping
you
deep
just dropped
stuff.
it.
Drops it,
But
Kaz.
what you said about the community, I can't even repeat what he said.
Yeah,
the church.
Yeah,
What
it started
did
with
you-
the individual and
Did
it
you
goes
get it?
to the community. But it's similar to like, you know, to even take it like Bible is like, you know, when Jesus spoke to the Samaritan woman,
Yes.
and then later on in the chapter, the whole community was affected by the individualization and the specificity. And I think
That's it.
something in, like you said, you can't completely get away from the individual transformation
Yeah.
will transform the community.
Yeah.
And I think that's like what Gary said like so wonderfully. It's just like even Jesus understood that. He's like, there's times where
He was God.
yeah, I mean, he's pretty good at what he did.
Bit more insight than you and I have got.
No,
It's pretty good.
He's pretty good at what he did.
Right.
But he understood the need to like
Yeah,
the
the
individual
individual-
has
yeah,
the power
exactly.
because it says then that Samaritan woman then they believed the community believed because of her witness.
And it's the thing that, sorry, I'll get to the psychology stuff, but it's just, I'm just
I
struck
just think
by
it's
what you said.
important for us to
It's so
separate.
important, though.
They're both interconnected. You cannot deny
Absolutely.
that. However, the conversation is about, all right, I'm locked. I've just realised what's going on in my life,
Yeah.
and now, all right, how do I?
'Cause if
what's
you
the
do- 'cause
process
if-
what's the journey? What's
Exactly.
to begin to unlock.
Once that the beautiful thing is that once that individual journey is in motion, then the community piece, then the corporate piece, then the group piece will get into place. Because one thing that I was just talking to Rocky actually earlier about this, one thing that is really interesting about what's happening in the world right now is that if you look at the recent events and the huge outcry from people, you look at what's happening and you feel that there's a real societal paradigm shift about to happen, but the structures of power haven't changed. What's changed is people and people. Anyway, but that's a whole nother
That's for a whole
conversation.
nother conversation.
That's a whole nother conversation.
One of us went,
Gary's looking at me going, no, go on then, talk about the journey. All right, let's talk about the journey. Okay, the individual. So how do you get unstuck? I think there are a couple of things. First of all, understanding your emotional system. One thing that the research talks about is, I'm going to use a jargon term here, but I'll explain.
Remember,
I'll
I
explain the
interrupted
jargon.
you to try and go, let's...
Yeah. I'll
when
explain.
You started
I'll
talking
explain.
About this,
yeah. So your emotional system is your limbic system. It's the part of the brain that is responsible for it's your emotional brain. And when we talk about trauma recovery in psychological intervention, we often talk about limbic system therapy, which is really engaging with your emotional brain. And that's about noticing what you're feeling, observing, being okay with that, tolerating your emotions, trying to,
Great
so
space.
rather than suppressing, rather than trying to delete, because that really doesn't work, it only makes it worse. So it's really noticing, acknowledging, observing, tolerating, so being okay with that. In limbic system theory, we go into what emotions actually are, and we talked about negative emotions already. We didn't talk about positive emotions, and we have to, because actually there's something called the heliotropic effect, which is, I know, big words. Sorry, I'll explain. You know how plants are designed to stretch and move towards sunlight?
Yeah.
That's how they grow.
Yeah.
Our brains have been designed to stretch and move towards positive emotions. So we would, like I said earlier, we haven't been designed to stay in the negative emotional state. It's not good for our body. It poisons us with lots of things that are not good in the long term. They're good to act right here, right now. Positive emotions are the opposite. And what they do is they're not about helping you in the moment. They're about helping you in the next moment and the next and the next and the next.
Yeah.
So if we understand emotions as dynamic rather than static, that really helps. So practically speaking, what I mean is emotions are not a Facebook status. They're not. So they're dynamic. They come in waves and then they dissipate. So understanding emotions in that way can really help people respond and deal and manage those emotions. So knowing that they're, and as they come in waves, negative emotions, for example, they scream at you, literally, because your brain processes them with a lot more intensity.
Well, it needs to, because it's get out of here.
Get out of here right now. You need to leave, you need to leave.
Yep.
But then, like we said earlier, the computer doesn't really necessarily interpret the levels of threats. It just interprets threat, go, fight, run. But actually, maybe it's not a life-threatening situation, and yet there you are stuck, and then there's trauma, you're even more stuck. Now, what positive emotions do, they're like medicine to our brains. They literally are medicine. Emotion science refers to positive emotions as nutrients. They give life to your brain, literally. Now, emotions happen in a process. They're not like feelings. Feeling states are, you know, something happens, you feel something, it goes away. But emotions are a process. They're triggered by something, whether it's the event or the trauma or the imprint of the trauma. They're triggered by something. And you have 6 seconds, I've talked about this with you before, 6 seconds between the moment you experience the trigger and the response, the actual response. What happens in those 6 seconds?
So, all right, hold that thought. All right? Pause for me.
Pause.
You said
Go get a coffee.
You said
come back.
something that's really important, right?
Yeah.
Emotions are not feelings.
Yeah. Yeah. So the way
because the thing, so now I'm talking to someone, and I go, "How you feeling?"
Yeah.
It's not his feelings that are the issue. Now the feelings are real.
Yeah.
But what's running is the emotions. Just put feelings here and put emotions here for me.
Yeah, so feeling, where?
Or just separate the two. So because you're just in a very, oh yeah, and you got feelings and you got emotions. They're not the same thing, and we need to understand this. Like just separate the two for a moment and then come back to what you're talking about. Right?
So feelings are, when I talk about feelings, I talk about the embodied sensations that are one of the results from an emotion.
Right.
Okay. So feelings are those embodied sensations. It could be the tightness of the chest when you experience real either pain or hurt or hate or fear. It could be the butterflies in your stomach. Those are feelings. They're embodied sensations. And emotions are a deeper process. They're a deeper cognitive, biological process, which involves a trigger, point number one. Point number two, which is key, by the way, we'll come back to it, is cognitive appraisal. Appraisal, how we appraise the trigger, the situation, what actually happened, basically, is point number one. So, point number two is how we interpret that situation.
So cognitive is thinking.
Yeah, cognitive is thinking, appraisal is interpretation. So point number two is how you interpret that particular event. Magic can happen there, not magic. No. That's where the Holy Spirit will intervene. It's in the appraisal, we'll come back to it. And after we interpret, we evaluate a situation, that determines everything that happens next. So after that, you then have the physical sensations, the embodied sensations, because emotions aren't private. They're broadcast to people. Why? Because people see them in your face, your posture, your voice. There's all sorts of things that then happen depending on how you approach, not just depending on the event. Because people think that, oh, this happened, obviously I'm feeling this way. No, it's not obvious. No. It's not obvious. Because one event can trigger different reactions here. Why? Because if there's a different filter, which is the appraisal, we can interpret the same event in completely different ways. So it's not obvious. So that's the other thing that we all need to understand, is that it's, oh, why are people feeling like this? Why did, well, it's
They're looking
not
at a completely different framework, so we could all be in the same event.
It's never obvious how you're going to respond. It depends on so many things, so many filters, so many things that will shape your worldviews, your response, and how you appraise situations. So then you have those reactions, those feelings, the embodied sensations, and then you have point number four, which is the responses, the actions, the behaviors, and how all of that shapes your present and potentially your future, because actions come with consequences. So this is the emotional process that we need to understand.
All right, so let's start at number one.
How much time do we have?
No, because I think you said you went 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah.
I think it was about 2 or 3. You went, I'll come back to that.
Yeah,
Which
yeah.
obviously, the fact that you said, I'll come back to that, it means it's probably pretty important.
It is
because
pretty
you thought, I've got to explain this, and I'll come back to that.
To be able to go back to that.
So let's come back to that.
Yeah, so it's layers of understanding so that we can have this conversation. So if we think about now that we've understood the process of emotions, let's go back to positive emotions, which are like nutrients. They literally give life to your brain and they help you become a better version of yourself. Whereas negative emotions are about defend, protect, right now, stay alive. Positive are, I'm going to be even better. When I see this situation tomorrow, I will respond differently because I'm experiencing positive emotions. So that's what they do to you. They broaden your range of thought and action when it comes to circumstances that you experience. And the other reason why they're important is that not only they're important at an individual level in terms of how they normalize and help you regulate your limbic system, back to that as well. So your kind of emotional center in the brain that is stuck, hijacked by trauma, stuck in that loop of alarm bells ringing all the time. What positive emotions do is they actually help you self-regulate. Positive emotions are things like...
Self-regulate.
Okay, self-regulate, good. So
the reason I'm asking is because I've been in many a conversation and go,
it's true.
you got to learn how to self-regulate, and people go...
What does that mean? So self-regulate is when you, again, are experiencing hyper-arousal, because we explained what that is already, so I don't need to go there again. But you're in that loop, your SNS, your fight or flight, you feel your heart rate increasing, you feel your blood pressure increase, you feel the tightness in the chest, you feel the pit of your stomach shrink, you're feeling all the embodied sensations. You can actually train all of that system that is automatic. You actually have control over that system. You can train that system to calm down. You can, through, for example, breathing is really important. I talked about this recently in another thing, what we call breathing through your heart. This is actually really important. We need to explain what this means, breathing through your heart. So you have a nerve that is called the vagus nerve. It starts at your brain stem and it links your brain to organs in your body and particularly to your heart. And the vagus nerve is the thing that helps you catch your breath and calm down after a fright. So you're frightened by something, sympathetic nervous system, so, fight or flight.
Just to help people with this connection, right?
Yeah.
So when you talk to people who have had something traumatic happen to them, or sometimes it can be an accident, or sometimes it could be something that someone has done to you. If you are speaking to people, this is what I often hear people say. It's like my personality changed because of what took place. I'm not the same person anymore because of this. I don't know how to explain it. I just know from that moment on, I became a different person. Is that what they're trying to express linked to what you're saying?
Absolutely. That's such a... And I find it fascinating when people explain it like that, actually, because it really is. It changes systems in your body. It really does. And that's okay. So that can't be undone. And but that can be, you can live with that and be okay. You can release, you can, you can normalize, you can self-regulate. And for example, going back to the vagus nerve, that helps you calm your heart rate after a fright. You can normalize, you can use that. If you understand that, you can then use it to help self-regulate, which is why I'm talking about this nerve. So, for example, in moments when you feel...
The reason why I'm saying it's important, because you're going to say something in a moment that people are going to dismiss because they're going to think, oh, that's just too simplistic, right? So I'm trying to get you to give enough
Yeah.
So what seems so simple,
Yeah. Yeah. Can
it's
literally
not simple,
change.
it's
No.
just easily done.
Exactly.
Right? And because it's so easily done, people will, if they're not careful, dismiss what seems to be too simplistic. So that's why I'm
Absolutely.
labouring just you to keep just doing this
Yeah.
in what you're explaining.
Yeah,
right?
but
So-
it's so true because people do dismiss it because it sounds too simple. But if only we can help people understand how important and how life-changing these adjustments can be in helping you manage, self-regulate, and therefore manage trauma.
So I'm going to get control of things by self-regulating.
Yeah.
And it's something here,
Yeah.
linked to something here,
Exactly.
the vagus nerve.
Exactly.
And it has so much bearing over so many things.
Yeah.
So how do I make it all work for me?
So one thing that anyone can do is actually, and it's important that we explain what it is because there are lots of prejudices or pre-assumptions around what this word actually means, especially in our church context, if I may say. So I just did. Mindfulness. There's no mind without mindfulness. And mindfulness is simply noticing in the present your physical sensations, your emotions, your feelings, and your thoughts, everything that's happening within you and then in your environment. So that's what I mean by mindfulness. And that's one of the things that there's a huge body of research and evidence showing that that really helps with self-regulating. So if you practice a mindfulness exercise, which could be as simple as when you're feeling...
Just back up. We're going to practice a mindfulness exercise. Explain mindfulness one more time.
Yeah, so it's noticing, being very aware in the present right now of what you're feeling, what you're thinking, the physical sensations that you can experience. Putting it very simply, that's what mindfulness is.
Creating space
and in
rest.
the process of it, I'm learning how to get this out of this part of my head.
Exactly.
That's
Exactly.
ruling everything into
And
another
getting
part
the
of my head.
prefrontal cortex active, which is the part responsible for, creative thinking, solutions, finding strategies for, finding the solutions to the problems that you're experiencing right now as an individual, as a society, et cetera, et cetera. So we need to be activating the part of our brain that will help us move forward, that will get us out of the loop in the emotional brain. Okay. That's what this does.
Right, so sorry.
So back to the exercise?
Yes. No, it's
it's good because it
so back
breaks
to
it
the
down for people.
exercise. Where's my camera? Which camera am I talking to? Is it that one? No, it's not. I can't see it. It doesn't matter. Sorry, I can't see the camera. So wherever you are, people at home. So really, whatever the physical sensation that you experience, if you're able to breathe in through your nose calmly, and as you breathe in, imagine the oxygen coming into your body, nurturing all the organs in your body with life and energy, and helping you stay alive and survive. Really simple. And you can think about how God has designed that system to function, and you can focus your attention to the area around your heart. And sometimes it helps when people feel a tightness in the chest. It helps to kind of even touch that area around your heart and see how it feels and see it's okay. What you're doing there, and then after you do that, you exhale. And it's when you exhale that you activate your vagus nerve. And this is what we call the cardiac vagal tone, which is basically the healthy heart rhythms. That's what cardiac vagal tone is. And when you're exhaling, that's when you're activating your parasympathetic nervous system, which is the other part of your autonomic autopilot system in your brain, which is called the rest and digest system, which will help because they're two sides of the same coin, right? The fight or flight, you need to stay alive, you need to do this, or the rest and digest, you can chill out. And that space, for this to be active, the other one can't be at the same time.
Yeah.
So this breathing technique...
When you talk about the breathing, right?
Yeah.
So, because I think one of the things that's important for people to grab hold of, right? So that's breathing. So if I'm jogging and I'm sprinting or I need adrenaline
Yeah.
to keep going and to push on,
Yeah.
what will activate the release of adrenaline is...
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
So
that's not what I mean.
That's not what you mean.
No.
Because it's important, because some people go,
I'm very calm.
No.
that's not what we're talking about.
Nope. That's why I said earlier, breathe through your nose. But it's important to reiterate that, because otherwise you start hyperventilating and you increase the other system which you're trying to regulate and to calm down. So in through your nose, out through your nose. And this really coaxes your brain into feeling that you're safe, that it's okay, you're not in danger, you're fine. And the more you do this and the more mindful you are as you do this, the more you can restore all of this emotional system as well. Because you can train yourself and you can train that system to and that's what we mean by self-regulating. You can train your system to realize that you're actually not in danger. And it might feel, you might still feel the pain from the trauma, and that's the other steps of the journey that we need to talk about. But at least you can start the first step, which is to feel how you feel and be okay with that, because people need to be okay with how they feel. That's step number one. Okay. There's a few more to go. That's only step number one.
But as I said, this is a continuance of a conversation to try and help people understand what's going on in them.
Yeah.
Help people understand what's going on in other people. And I think, I think a lot of, even with mental health, mental illness, even you link to, then we're talking about racism and the impact of it on a person's life, and everything from the injustice of it to all of that, that you use the word tolerance, which is a funny word these days because no words have got meanings anymore.
Yeah.
But the ability to just to sit there and go, you know what, I'm prepared to just try and understand. I'm going to be tolerant of your situation. You're going to be tolerant of my situation. So if we're talking to people who have got mental illness issues, even, I'm not sure you can use the word issues anymore, but, and all of this, that the understanding is a really important, really important thing. So hopefully, if we didn't do anything, we started the conversation, and if at minimum, hopefully, we've just gone, come on, let's get a little bit more understanding of what's going on here in people's lives, and we'll just keep moving forward. So, anyway, do you find that?
It's great. It's good. I think we've it's equipped people, isn't it? And I think, like as you said, the conversation keeps going, and even for, as you alluded to, people that aren't experiencing trauma, it's creating those spaces for people to breathe in.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is great.
And just as we finish up, so this is the end. We've sort of come to end of time, and we'll continue on this. But even in this where we find ourselves right now, I'm still fascinated with a passage of scripture where Jesus says, "Don't let your hearts be troubled."
Yeah.
And he says, he starts with, and then he says, "I'm going to give you a peace that the world can't give you," meaning the ways of man, systems of man, the government of man, all of that. That's what it means, but that the world can't give you.
Yeah.
That he can give us a peace. And that peace is about healing, that peace is about restoration, and wholeness. That's what he's talking about. I can give you a wholeness. I can restore to a wholeness. I can heal so that the happening is not the thing that's ruling anymore. And he says, and he talks about that peace in our minds, and he talks about that peace in our hearts. And I just want to encourage you, if you've been listening to this or watching this, that God can get you through this. I believe that with all my heart. And we're just going to continue this whole conversation on mental health and wellness when it comes to our mental well-being and all of that, so that we can be all healed, mended, and whole people, and maybe have a go at taking it to the world of healed, mended, and a whole world. But that's a big goal. Let's start with you. So thanks for being part of us. Thanks, Anna. Thanks, Rocky. And we'll continue on. Take care, hey?